As our country prepares to celebrate Independence Day, the 4th of July later this week, many Americans are still reeling from last week's presidential debate. A lot has changed in the political sphere since last Thursday's debates. Following the debates, I was shocked by the CNN panel and their overwhelming disappointment in President Biden's performance. To my surprise, many of these experts indicated that they had received communications from Democratic Party leaders and prominent donors expressing those leaders and donors wanted President Biden to immediately step down and or withdraw from the 2024 presidential race. The panel discussed who might have enough influence to convince Joe Biden to withdraw from the presidential campaign for 2024. The conclusion reached by the panel and others I've heard since then indicated that no one, except perhaps Joe Biden's wife, Jill, would have the ability to convince him to withdraw from the race. It is clear to me that this is not going to happen. Clip of Jill Biden encouraging her husband immediately following the debate last Thursday night.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts.
And she's really talked to him as though he were a student in her third grade class. There's also been considerable discussion about what can be done if President Biden refuses to step down and insists on remaining a candidate in the 2024 election. This has led to numerous discussions by scholars, by pundits, by others about the implementation of the 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution. This 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified on February 10, 1967, following the assassination of the great President John F. Kennedy. He was killed on November 22, 1963, so it took 3 years for this amendment to be ratified. This amendment, 25th Amendment, clarified the procedures for replacing the president or vice president in the event of death, removal, resignation, or incapacitation. The primary focus of this section is Section 4 of the 25th Amendment as it relates to the situation we're dealing with now. Sure that I don't misquote, so I'm going to read off of the Section 4 of the 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and here's what it says. Quote, if the vice president and a majority of the principal officers of the executive departments or another body designated by Congress declare in writing that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office, the vice president immediately assumes the powers and duties of the office as acting president. The president can resume the powers and duties by declaring that no inability exists, unless the vice president and a majority of the principal officers or the other body declare in writing within 4 days that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties. In that case, Congress decides the issue. End quote. So, as you might expect, it's a little bit complicated and not the simplest thing to read or to understand, so we'll iron that out a little bit. All right, so we've talked about a majority of the principal officers of the executive departments. So what does that mean? Well, it means the president's cabinet, the people that he put in place. And so it's a whole bunch of secretaries, in fact, 14 of them, and the attorney general. So you have the attorney general and the following secretaries: of state, of the treasury, of defense, of the interior, of agriculture, of commerce, of labor, of health and human services, of housing and urban development, of transportation, of energy, of education, of veterans affairs, and of homeland security. So those are the 14 secretaries plus the attorney general comprise the 15 people, a minimum of 8 of which would constitute a majority of these folks that would have to join the vice president in seeking to have, well, in making a declaration in essence, that the president of the United States is no longer able to serve in the capacity of president. Obviously, this is a huge hurdle. Any vice president would be reluctant to make a claim because it may appear that he or she was trying to take over the Oval Office without having been elected to serve there. There is also a loyal component, given that the president chose to put the position of the vice president in the position that she holds. Moreover, the cabinet members were each appointed by the president and are unlikely to turn against him, and you would need at least 8 of the 15 to turn against him and make this declaration that he is no longer fit to hold the office of president. Additionally, even if this long shot were to occur, the president, pursuant to Section 4 itself, can resume the powers and duties of the presidency by simply declaring he doesn't have a problem. He has no inability to perform his duties. If that happens, the president would immediately be placed back in the position of president upon him saying that he was fit to practice. Now, if President Biden or any other president were to do that, then the vice president and the majority of the officers would again have to declare in writing within 4 days that the president is unable to discharge the duties. If that long shot were to occur, it would go to Congress to make the ultimate decision as to whether the president would continue to serve out his term. And it would be their job to advise the president if they deem that he is, in fact, unfit. All right, so for a number of reasons, such an occurrence, that is, the president's removal by Amendment 25, is very unlikely, primarily because the election is only 4 months away. This situation is reminiscent of President Woodrow Wilson's situation way back in 1919, back in a time where things were very, very different than they are today. President Woodrow Wilson had a stroke, but no one officially assumed his powers and duties. This was partly, at least partly, maybe completely, because his condition was kept secret by his wife Edith and White House physician Dr. Cary Grayson. By the time Wilson's condition became known to the public, there were only a few months remaining in his term, and no congressional leaders were interested in pursuing his removal. Another interesting anecdote associated with this amendment is that in 1989, President Reagan, who completed his term as president of the United States in 1989, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 1994. Significantly, during his term as president, President Reagan told his neurosurgeon, Dr. Ruge, R-U-G-E, that he expected doctors to test his memory and promised to resign from the office of president in the event that his memory deteriorated. According to Dr. Ruge, who treated President Reagan nearly daily from 1981 until 1985, he never saw any indication of Alzheimer's during the time that President Reagan served us as President of these United States. I want to give you a final tidbit that not very many of us knew about. I didn't know until I started preparing for this episode. Vice President Harris was the first to hold the powers and duties of the United States president. She served as a president temporarily on November 19th, 2021, when President Joe Biden temporarily transferred his powers and duties as president to Vice President Harris before he underwent a colonoscopy. Officially, Vice President Harris served as the acting president of the United States from 10:10 a.m. until 11:35 a.m. on November 19th, 2021. I hope it is my prayer that you have found this discussion interesting and educational. It is quite a circumstance that we find ourselves in this country. Only God knows what the future holds. The good news is that He loves us. He is a good Father. He loves His children and will continue to provide for us through whatever comes this year and on throughout eternity. I hope that you will continue to like, subscribe, share, and comment about this video. Thank you again for tuning in, and may the Lord bless and keep you until the next time that we are together. Say goodbye, Seth.